Okay, so this is my reading of Superman and Me by Sherman Alexie. I didn't do any pre-reading. I did some previewing though. Just reading some of the first sentences. By the title, I'm going to predict that Superman comics or the movies, it affected his life in some way. So, I learned to read with a Superman comic book. Simple enough, I suppose. I cannot recall which particular Superman comic book I read, nor can I remember which villain he fought in that issue. I cannot remember the plot, nor the means by which I obtained the comic book. What I can remember is that I was 3 years old, so right there I'm going to infer that he was smarter than other people his age, or just learned quicker. A Spookney Indian boy living with his family on the Spookney Indian Reservation in eastern Washington state. We were poor by most standards, but one of my parents usually managed to find some minimum wage job or another, which made us middle class by reservation standards. I had a brother and 3 sisters. We lived on a combination of regular paychecks, hope, fear, and government surplus food. So right there, that starting from we were poor by most standards was a lot of text to self right there, because I grew up fairly poor, living on government help. So that was a connection. My father, who is one of the few Indians who went to a Catholic school on purpose, was an avid reader of Western spy thrillers, murder mysteries, gangster epics, basketball player biographies, and anything else he could find. He bought his books by the pound at Dutch's Pawn Shop, Goodwill, Salvation Army, Value Village. So that's also a text to self, because I remember when I was little going to thrift stores around town with my mom and just filling up plastic bags of different books. When he had extra money, he bought new novels at supermarkets, convenience stores, and hospital gift shops. Our house was filled with books. They were stacked in crazy piles in the bathroom, bedrooms, and living rooms. In a fit of unemployment-inspired creative energy, my father built a set of bookshelves, and so on filled them with random assortment of books about Kennedy assassination, Watergate, the Vietnam War, and an entire 23-book series of the Apicay Westerns. My father loved books, and since I love my father with aching devotion, I decided to love books as well. So the wording right there, the author's craft, the aching devotion, that was really good diction and describing that. I inferred from that sentence that he wanted to be like his father when he was little, saw him as someone who he could look up to. I can remember picking up my father's books before I could read. The words themselves were mostly foreign, but I still remember the exact moment when I first understood, with a sudden clarity, the purpose of a paragraph. I didn't have the vocabulary to say paragraph, but I realized that the paragraph was a fence that held words. The words inside a paragraph worked together for a common purpose. They had specific reasons for being inside the same fences. This knowledge delighted me. I began to think of everything in terms of paragraph. Our reservation was a small paragraph within the United States family house was a paragraph, distant from other paragraphs of the Librettes to the north. So as he's comparing everything to a paragraph, I thought that was really good author's craft and a good way to see things. And I really understood the way that he was explaining that. School to the west. Inside our house, each family member existed as a separate paragraph, but still had genetics and common experiences to link us. Now, using this logic, I can see my changed family as an essay of 7 paragraphs. Mother, father, older brother, the deceased sister, my younger twin sisters, and our adopted little brother. At the same time, I was seeing the world in paragraphs. I also picked up that Superman comic book, each panel complete with a picture, dialogue, and narrative. Excuse me. And narrative was 3-dimensional paragraph. In one panel, Superman breaks through a door. His suit is red, blue, and yellow. The brown door shatters into many pieces. That was good. Good describing of the colors that everything was. I look at the narrative above the picture. I cannot read the words, but I assume that it tells me Superman is breaking down the door. Aloud, I pretend to read the words and say, Superman is breaking down the door. So right there, I kind of just, pictures can really help you understand what's going on in a story. Especially when you're, younger and you can't read, because he took that picture and inferred to what it was going to say. Words, dialogue also float out of Superman's mouth. Because he is breaking down the door, I assume he says, I am breaking down the door. Once again, I pretend to read the words and say aloud, I am breaking down the door. In this way, I learned to read. I just thought that it was super cool that he taught himself to read like that. This might be an interesting story all by itself. A little Indian boy teaches himself to read at an early age and advances quickly. He reads Grapes of Wrath in kindergarten. So, right there, Grapes of Wrath in kindergarten, that's quite advanced. So I'm guessing that concludes that he was smarter than the rest of his peers growing up. When other children were struggling with Dick and Jane, if he'd been anything but an Indian boy living on a reservation, he might have been called a prodigy. So I like how that is kind of going into the standards that society had for the Native Americans that were here before us, but we've looked down on them for most of our time. But he is an Indian boy living on the reservation, and is simply an oddity. He grows into a man who often speaks of his childhood in third person, as if it will somehow dull the pain and make him sound more modest about his talents. A smart Indian is a dangerous person. Fact or opinion, I put right there, just because that's obviously his opinion, but can't help but be a fact, because that's just how people have looked at the Native Americans, as if they're smart, they're dangerous, and they're supposed to be dumb. Wildly feared and ridiculed by Indians and non-Indians alike, I fought with my classmates on a daily basis. They wanted me to stay quiet when non-Indian teachers asked for answers, for volunteers, for help. We were Indian children who were expected to be stupid. Most lived up to those expectations inside the classroom, but subverted from them on the outside. They struggled with basic reading in school, but could remember how to sing a few dozen powwow songs. They were not monosyllabic in front of their non-Indian teachers, but they could tell complicated stories and jokes at the dinner table. So I just highlighted that because I thought that that was important to the story, that these other kids that lived on the reservation to him acted stupid in front of his teachers, but at home they're actually pretty smart. They submissively ducked their heads when confronted by a non-Indian adult, but would slug it out when an Indian bully who was 10 years older. As Indian children, we were expected to fall into the non-Indian world. Those who failed were ceremonially accepted by other Indians and pitied by non-Indians. I refused to fail. I was smart, I was arrogant, I was lucky. I read books late into the night until I could barely keep my eyes open. I read books at recess, then during lunch, and in a few minutes left after I had finished my classroom assignments. I read books in the car when my family traveled to powwows or basketball games. Right there where he says powwows or basketball games, I just thought that that was interesting because those are obviously two normal things from his childhood, but they were things that not normal white children would be doing. The powwows, exactly. So, in shopping malls, I ran to the bookstore and read bits and pieces of as many books as I could. I read books my father bought home from the pawn shops in secondhand. I read the books I borrowed from the library. I read the backs of cereal boxes. I read the newspaper. I read the bulletins posted on the walls of the school and the clinic, the tribal offices, the post office. I read junk mail. I read auto repair manuals. I read magazines. I read anything that had words and paragraphs. I read anything. I read with equal parts in joy, desperation. I love those books, but I also knew that the love had only one purpose. I was trying to save my life. So that's just an interesting thing to say right there. Is does he mean actually saving his life, or does he mean breaking the norms of society? Despite all the books I read, I am still surprised I became a writer. I was going to be a pediatrician. I didn't catch that the first time I read this. I was going to be a pediatrician. It's kind of odd that he wanted to be a pediatrician but ended up becoming a writer. These days, I write novels, short stories, and poems. I visit schools and teach creative writing to Indian kids. In all my years in the reservation school systems, I never taught how to write poetry, short stories, or novels. I was certainly never taught to write that Indians wrote poetry. So here I'm inferring that, well, it's happening, that he is breaking from the norms of society of being an Indian kid. I cannot recall a single time that guest teacher visited the reservation. They must have been visiting teachers. Who were they? Who are they now? Do they exist? Right there, I just had a thought that there must have been visiting teachers, but he doesn't remember them. So does that mean that the reservation schools were getting less than white schools were getting? Many writing their own poems, short stories, and novels. They have read my books, and they have read many other books. They look at me with bright eyes and arrogant wonder. They're trying to save lives. Again, that sentence comes up. They're trying to save their lives. Then, with all of a sudden, an already defeated Indian kids who sit in the back rows and ignore me with theoretical precision. So, I feel like he is upset that he didn't get to save them all, that there are still those kids that sit in the back row that feel like even if they read, they wouldn't do anything. Their pages of their notebooks are empty. They carry neither pencil nor pen. They stare out the windows. They refuse and resist. Books, I say to them. Books, I say. I throw my weight against their locked doors. The door holds. I am smart. I am arrogant. I am lucky. I am trying to save our lives. So, the fact that he ended with that sentence really ties the entire thing together. Again, when I said, he's trying to save everybody, but the door holds, so he wasn't able to save them. Alright, and that was my reading.